Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. In this session, we reach chapter 4 of Imam Zarnuji's text, Instruction of the Student. This session is entitled Respect and Knowledge in Those Who Possess It. Now, there are some points that need to be indicated to that come from the contemporary reality that we live in. Technology today has leveled relationships, right? Before, the hierarchy of education had a lot to do with access, but technology has to some extent allowed for access to information to take place at a very large scale, so that if you have a question, you're not dependent upon an expert, so to speak, in the living, but you refer to your access. So you access the internet and you see what's out there, right, in the info world. And then you're able to what? You're able to extract from that reality what you appear or believe to need as far as information is concerned. So one of the needs in education now is not so much instruction and content, that's necessary still, but how to use information, how to use and utilize information, how to determine what's valuable, what's not valuable. That's a skill in itself. So the equalization effect that comes from technology in giving people the false sense that they can know without having to make an investment and an effort, without having to make an investment and put in the effort to gain knowledge, right? Because they can get it at the snap of a few buttons. Here, we learned then that the concept of hikmah is very important. Hikmah in the Arabic language, it means to know how to put something in its proper place. So, insight or comprehension is one thing, content is another thing, hikmah is another thing. One can be a person that has memorized an abundant amount of information, right? But does that person comprehend it? One can comprehend, but does that person know how to implement, utilize, make it, bring into effect, effectuate the knowledge which one has? So the contemporary student of knowledge suffers from this sickness of believing that they don't need anyone. And when we marry that disease of the heart to another disease in which the contemporary student takes on scholarship with a marketplace value, they believe they can buy others. They believe they can buy the experience. They don't see the value of being guided and mentored into the learning process. They feel as though they can buy this book, right? They can buy this course, pay for this course, right? And they don't see the value of investing the self to go through a process which will form understanding, right? Which will form understanding. Matter of fact, the delusion in the contemporary culture, and this applies in part to the way that we deal with each other, is to think that every relationship in which someone has to be humble is a relationship of oppression and power. This is a false notion. Some relationships are power relationships. Some relationships are relationships which are oppressive. Some relationships are bankrupted. But not every form of hierarchy is wrong, right? We have a principle in the Quran فوق كل ذي العلم عليم. So the Quran teaches us that every person that's possessed of knowledge, there's someone that is more knowledgeable than them. Every person that's possessed of knowledge, there's always someone that's more knowledgeable than them. So there is an element of hierarchy, right? But in Islam, proving yourself in knowledge, right, is where the individualism can take place, right? But what we share in common is that we study the same realities. We study the Quran and the Sunnah, the Arabic language. So we have a shared background in that regard. And there are some principles that are there to guide our understanding, right? A logic that's universal, so to speak. So we don't have to bring in alien ideas, alien to the Islamic tradition, right? Alien to what we have gained, right? As a community, as far as experience and thinking and so on and so forth. So much so that it causes doubt in us. We should believe in the reality of how our scholars have taught us, right? We should believe in the reality of ijtihad, where there in ijtihad, there is some element or some space or room for growth, right? A person should try to aim for ijtihad, for understanding on one's own, but that what has to be a process. There has to be a process. So we should have confidence in our ulama. That doesn't mean blind confidence. We should have confidence in the educational approach of our scholars as it was taken in the past, right? Not automatically doubt on its efficacy. This is one of the sicknesses of the age, the prevalence of doubt, so much so that people begin to become dysfunctional. In this chapter, Imam Zarnuji talks about respecting knowledge in those who possess it. Know that in the pursuit of knowledge, one does not acquire learning nor profit from it unless one holds knowledge in esteem. That's the first thing. You have to value it, hold it in esteem, and those who possess it. Right. So one must esteem and venerate the teacher. Right. It is said that he who attains knowledge does not do so except through respect, while he who fails in this goal does so only by ceasing to respect and venerate learning and its bearers. It is stated that respect is preferable to obedience, right? For you do not perceive a man becoming an unbeliever through his rebellion against Allah's revelation, but by his mocking of his lack of respect, his lack of reverence, and by discarding reverence for it. One aspect of venerating knowledge consists in holding the teacher in esteem. So that's the first principle. So there's some adab, there's some etiquettes then that embody the reality of respect. Like learning when to speak and when not to speak. And I would say when to criticize and not to criticize, right? When to challenge and not to challenge, right? The student in the contemporary age is deprived of this reality. So then the end result is that one is deprived of the fruits of learning when he slights his teacher. And only in a small way does he profit from his knowledge. So there's the adab or the etiquette that we should have with the Quran, with books, with those instruments of learning, right? Taking care of them and so on and so forth. That's important. Some people place the Quran on the floor. Some people abuse their books and so on and so forth. That's a beginning step. But even in order to be able to carry that sort of etiquette, we have to have respect for human beings as well. The Quran especially, but human beings as well. And in that regard, we allow ourselves to be guided. Also, venerating our study partners, our friends, the people who are seeking knowledge with us, respecting them, writing clearly, out of respect, right? Preparing properly for one's class out of respect. You value, in other words, you're valuing it. The whole process of learning, the teacher, and those who are your companions in the quest. Not putting them down, competing with them unnecessarily. So in seeking knowledge, it is necessary that one not choose by himself the kind of learning to pursue, but entrust the matter to the teacher. Oh, wow. Here, this is where this is very difficult for a lot of us. The equalization force comes. What we believe, our opinion, is just as equal to any other opinion. So one begins to choose for oneself. In at face value, there seems to be nothing wrong with it. But how do you know what a good choice is in knowledge? This is what Imam Zarnuji is teaching us. Humility then entails some degree of trust. And it doesn't have to be blind trust. But people don't progress because they don't take proper advice. And advice and learning a lot of times comes with stages. This is another issue as related to the dominance of ignorance in the community. When ignorance is dominant in the community, people don't know where to begin and where to end and who to study with and what to study and when and so on and how and all this. Imam Burhan ad-Din, he said, in the quest for learning in the early times, the students entrusted their affairs of learning to their teacher. And now, and in this matter, did they reach their goals? But nowadays, they make their own choices. Imagine he was saying that in a time where the ulama were still of caliber. Right? But now, they make their own choices and fail to reach their objectives in knowledge of the deen and fiqh. So, knowledge is hostile to the person of pride, the youthful who are pride. Okay, all glory, stature, position, right? In learning here, right? All glory is attained by exertion, not by luck. It is luck without exertion. Is luck without exertion of any glory? How many a slave ranks with the free, and how many a freeborn ranks with the slave? That's an idiom. So, distinguishing yourself in knowledge, not in the sense of pride, but in the sense of gaining and growing, comes back to this issue of learning the proper attitude, the proper way of comporting ourselves toward Allah first, towards our very selves, and how we express ourselves and how we carry ourselves towards our teachers and towards our companions. This is a lesson that we find is hard to swallow for a lot of Western students. Right? The respect factor is the number one reason why many students don't find themselves growing. Second, the lack of investment and exertion in seeking knowledge. We find that our students, they put their effort in getting a degree from this university and that university because it hits them really hard. It hits them where it hurts. It hits them within the money factor. We find that when there's a need or when there's a necessity, there's so much exertion and investment. But when it comes to knowledge of the deen, we find that we don't sacrifice, that we don't exert ourselves, that we don't focus. But when it comes to matters of the dunya, we find that we're ready to give even our iman for that reality. Na'udhu billah. وأقول قولي هذا واستغفر لي ولكم والحمد لله رب العالمين.